his faith, but I don't know, maybe we could start calling it this in our bulletins. There's this theory that some historians and theologians have that every 500 years the church changes immensely, and I think this is a marker of change that is coming to the church. So what happens during Lent, though? What happens during these 40 days from Ash Wednesday leading up to Easter? And what are some practices that people traditionally have done? Maybe not necessarily that you have done or expected to do, but just historically. And Mark Wahlberg is going to show us what some of these things are. I can't believe I got away with putting this on the screen right now. Prayer, fasting, and almsgiving have been the traditional 3 ways to participate in a holy Lent. Prayer, fasting from different types of food, almsgiving, so giving your money directly to the poor or giving your money to poor organizations. Mark, apparently he's a very devout Catholic too and has a TikTok presence where he talks about his faith a lot. I don't have TikTok, so I don't know these things. But these practices for Christians for centuries have gotten us in touch with our humanity. They have gotten us in touch with the humans around us, not just our own kind of not just our own ways of living and how we exist in the world, but other people around us. And they get us closer to God as well for Christians in the past and Christians today. And they get us closer to people that love God and that God loves. Meaning, we can look back at these saints that we're going to talk about for these next 3 weeks, these pillars of faith. These people, they're people as well. It's not like they are not perfect. But these practices can kind of have this shared sense of working together. And if you've ever been outside, if you've ever done manual labor, even with a small group, you might know what I'm talking about. Getting something done with other people can have this effect of coming together and feeling pretty good about what you're doing and giving you the stamina to kind of keep going on. Yeah. So, okay, bye, Mark. That's it. And my question to you guys, in your own words, I want you to take a minute, and I first want you to turn to your neighbor. Yeah, we're going to do that today, twice actually. And I want you to turn to your neighbor, and I want you guys to talk about what is Lent to you in your own words. And this isn't necessarily a time to talk about what you're giving up unless you wanted to or taking on or this, that. Just how do you think of Lent as a season in the church? And maybe it doesn't have an effect on your life. Maybe it does. And then if you are so bold enough, I want to hear from y'all what Lent is to you. So I'm going to have you break for like 2 minutes, and then I'll have you come back. Well, okay. We've had a little bit of time to talk, and my assistant Troy Beaudry will run around with the microphone. And as these conversations are starting to wind down, is there anything that you heard or you said or your neighbor said for the betterment of the group? I really like getting everyone together and getting to hear from some of us like this. So yeah, what are some of the things that came up for y'all in your conversations? And raise your hand and Troy will scurry over to you. Be brave. Oh, yes. Do you know Troy?
No, this is the first time we've met.
Yeah.
So it depends on the year. I think sometimes it feels like a burden. Like 2020, Lent was not a vibe that year. It was a vibe, but it was an unwelcome one.
Yeah.
And then other years, it feels like a chance to like, okay, this is the year we're gonna like ace Christianity. And I was really grateful for a few years ago when Aaron said the point is not to win at Lent, and if you do win at Lent, you miss the point, and that has really stuck with me and been helpful. But this year, what Lent has meant to me is just has started the year with just like a tremendous amount of heaviness, and Lent felt like a container for those feelings. They felt like they were kind of spilling into a lot of areas of my life, and Lent felt like a place where I could put them.
Yeah. Yeah. Like this big space. I like that. What other things came up? You don't have to have a PhD in English to speak. Yeah.
I was gonna
No, I want to hear from you, Carol. Yeah.
Preparation for what is coming, preparation for the resurrection and for Good Friday. It's like we were saying, like for Advent, you prepare, you get ready
Yeah.
for what is going to happen in the course of the year.
Okay, yeah. Anyone else? What other things came up? We've got some back here.
This is just a question because
Yeah.
at our table, we talked about when we were young that we had mite boxes. Have you ever heard of them? 'Cause you're so young.
I have not.
Yeah, we had mite box. They were like little animal cracker sized boxes,
Yeah.
and you had them in your family, and you put pennies in them and
Okay.
nickels in them, and they were given to people. And we were just saying they just sort of disappeared from.
Uh-huh.
But,
Celebration, and that have that empty cross now that we fill with flowers on
Yeah.
Easter Sunday.
Uh-huh.
With the children from Sunday school, we'd bring our mite boxes and fill that cross with them, and then
with
it was
coins.
like the widow's mite. The little children brought their little coins, mite. Yeah, and then that collection was given to something other than the church. It went out into the community. It was teaching the children how to think of others and
Yeah.
give of themselves.
I like that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Al. Dig it out. It's covered in dust. Yeah. One more before we continue? Anyone? It's okay. You don't have to. Oh, we got one back there.
I like that the church strips away some of the bells and whistles in our liturgy. No flowers, no Gloria, more silence.
Yeah.
The gospel procession, that music, like it just gets stripped down.
Yeah.
And there are parts of life, to Anna's point, there's parts of life that feel stripped down. And sometimes church is a place where you feel like you have to put on a happy face.
Yeah.
And I think Lent intentionally gives you a season in which we acknowledge the reality for people that is not always the case. And sometimes there can be awkward silences in church, and that's okay. There can be more somber tone, and that's okay. And I've always appreciated that rhythm shift, because Advent feels like it's another waiting time, but sometimes it's shorter and it's more. The Christmas insanity is coming, and Lent and Easter to me feel more religious than Christmas in the best sense of that word, more kind of connected to God, and if you're especially if you're new to a tradition like ours, Lent is like wait, what is happening?
Yeah.
Church is supposed to be like turn up to 11 all the time, and we turn it down, and I like that.
Yeah. There's no like Mariah Carey Easter song that's playing at the. Yeah. Audie had. Yeah.
As a child, I've always been Episcopalian, so don't know how other churches did. But it always puzzled me as to how Jesus got through those 40 days out in the wilderness without eating, drinking, and having to talk to a mean old guy.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's. I would like to know that as well. To be very clear, I don't need to take this off to tell you that. Yeah. Okay. I think we're gonna cut it off there. Thanks for. I did want to hear, or hang on to that because that'll come up in the future. I'd like hearing the range of perspectives before we talk about some of these saints. There's a quote from St. Augustine that says, and Lent's kind of like drawing closer to Jesus as he is getting closer, and we draw near to him as he's out in the desert and where he is for those 40 days, and we come with him to Jerusalem during Holy Week. But St. Augustine says that if you want to know who Jesus is, well, he started this out, if you want to know who Jesus is, read the Old Testament. And he was like, if you can't read the Old Testament, read the New Testament. And if you can't read the New Testament, read the Gospels. And if you can't read the Gospels, look to the lives of the saints. Look to the lives of the saints. Yeah, which is like this really I know. It's this moment where we can look to people that are like us in some ways, and that have gone before us, and that have walked in the same places where we've walked, and sometimes in the same places that Jesus has walked. And it can be a way to help us in our faith as we reflect on who we are during Lent. And so, Calvin and Hobbes. It's hard to read, so I guess I'm gonna read a comic out loud. I'm at that point in my life. Yeah, do you believe in, Calvin says to Hobbes the tiger, do you believe in the devil, the supreme evil being dedicated to the temptation, corruption, and destruction of man? And Hobbes says, I'm not sure man needs the help. And Calvin says, you just can't talk to animals about these things. I love Calvin and Hobbes. All of my ratty books that are at my parents' house are stained with my early morning cereal. I would eat my cereal and read Calvin and Hobbes. And we seem, though, Calvin says, and Hobbes kind of says, we seem to be doing a pretty good job of messing things up on our own without the help of anyone else. And so much of this human experience is being frightened by our mortality, being frightened about who we are. Remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. It is this comforting thing you hear on Ash Wednesday, but it is also this thing that frightens us a little bit. And so we now turn to the Cappadocians that really kind of, in my way, these are people that are great to walk alongside. And we'll be talking about 3 Cappadocians. They are all siblings, and I'll introduce you to them in a moment. I wanted to show you a map because I love a good map. And some of your eyes are glazing over, but what a map. What a map. This region that is orange is Cappadocia. Turkey is kind of where it is nowadays. And you can see kind of around, we've got Greece on the left, on the west. So Cappadocia is a part of the Roman Empire. Acts 2 records Cappadocians as being present for when the Holy Spirit descended upon those first disciples. And so they heard the gospel in their own language, and the church history tradition says that those are the folks that brought Christianity back to northern Turkey, to Cappadocia. And when these Cappadocians that we're going to talk about, when they were born in the mid-300s. So Christianity has just been picked up by Emperor Constantine. And he said, I've been a pagan, but I think that Jesus helped me cross a river and win a battle, so I'm going to follow him. And whether or not you think it was a real thing or a thing to kind of grab power, it's a little more complicated, and we can talk about that at another time. But Constantine becomes a Christian, the emperor, and a lot of people want to now become a Christian because the emperor is doing it. It's in some ways the cool thing to do, and in other ways, people's hearts are being changed, and people are coming to know the risen Christ. And so they are born in the early to mid 300s, where Christianity is kind of becoming this newer thing. And as you can imagine, the Roman Empire picks up Christianity, and what happens? Everything is like this utopia. There's no more slavery. Everyone, the poor are taken care of. There's no more war. There's no more famine, right? Wrong. That's right. Yeah, it actually doesn't fix a whole lot of things because we are people, and people are people. And just a generation prior, these people, Christians, were being killed, exiled, and ostracized for their faith. And now it is a move up in the social ladder. So the 3 people we're going to be talking about when we talk about the Cappadocians are the 3 folks on the left. Basil the Great, Gregory of Nyssa, and Macrina the Younger, because her mom was named Macrina, and she's a saint too. This is like the Kennedys of Cappadocia is kind of how I would describe them. With maybe less, not all the Kennedy stuff, but like, in every way that you can imagine that going, I hope that you hear it. Maybe the Manning brothers in the NFL, Travis Kelce and whatever his brother's name is, who's not dating Taylor Swift. Like these, they are a very holy family, these heavy hitters of the faith. And this guy who's on the far right, Gregory of Nazianzus, is a very good friend of Basil and a very good friend of all of these folks. But this is a family that has a lot of wealth, and by the end of their lives, by the end of the 4th century, the 300s, they've given nearly all of it away. They have set up monastic communities all over Cappadocia. Everyone except for Macrina becomes a bishop. The 3 of these, which is not necessarily, everyone kind of became a bishop back then, and none of them really wanted to be even a bishop, which is something we'll get into in a moment. But anyway, Macrina, though, was this source of this kind of mentor for her brothers and for the other leaders in Cappadocia at this time. And so we'll talk about the three on the left and Gregory at another time. So I'll start with Macrina. She is kind of this dark horse. She's a monastic. At age 12, like normal, she is, at age 12, like just normal things you do for your 12-year-old is you find them a spouse. And she says, at age 12, I don't kind of know how I feel about this, and divine providence, I don't know, the betrothed dies, and she says, I think I'd rather become a nun. I want to enter monastic life. Monasteries are really new at this point. She was born in 327. Constantine, around the beginning, like early 300s, becomes a Christian. So these Christians are going from, okay, being killed was kind of my ideal, but now what do I do? Like, no one's going to kill me for my faith. How can I become a martyr but not die? I can die to myself. I can die to the things around me, the life around me, the food around me, the drinking, the marriage, all of these things. To separate yourself, to focus on prayer and focus on being close to God, which can sound, we're into crazy saints, y'all. It's March Madness, but she's so clear-sighted, and she's so prayerful. And Gregory of Nyssa, her brother, writes about her after she dies. Both she and Basil die in the same year, 379, and it is just so heavy on both of the Gregorys. Gregory of Nazianzus preaches at Basil's funeral. Gregory of Nyssa writes about his sister in this most touching way after her death. And he talks about how Basil went off to college when they were young, and he comes back after going to university in Athens. He's going to be a rhetorician, he's going to be a lawyer. It's like going to Oxford University, or even maybe going to your regional school and coming back, and maybe after your first year of college, you came home for Thanksgiving, not even first year, first semester, and you took like a class, the Introduction to Psychology, and you just knew that your mom was like, yeah, you got to have some type of bipolar mom, right? Like, you can imagine people doing this, not me, I would never, but you can imagine people doing this. But Basil comes back after getting this education, and Macrina says, you're kind of a jerk. You kind of like went away, and you're puffed up, and you don't really know how to listen to other people. And he's kind of like, I don't know if I believe what my sister's saying, but it kind of eats at him, and it eats at him. And he has this turn of faith. He has this kind of second conversion and gets baptized. He had not been baptized yet. And so she is just this source, this clear-sighted source for her whole family on anything relating to faith. She turns the family estate into a monastery, and she counsels her brothers. Her brothers come back to her time and time again, and she speaks to them. And she gets them through their ministries. She gets them through these difficult times in their life and these pivotal points in their career. Gregory of Nyssa is the youngest of these folks, and Gregory of Nyssa is kind of a creative guy. He's quiet, he's a hard worker, he's an excellent theologian. The Nicene Creed that we say on Sunday mornings is shaped by him in a large part. They were all born after the Council of Nicaea, but when this creed gets taken up and kind of reworked at the Council of Chalcedon, his writings are a big part of what people kind of grab onto. He is kind of this interpreter of his siblings' work. He's the creative in the family, is how I would describe it, kind of the artist. So he takes Macrina's commitment to prayer and living not by yourself as a monastic person, but with other people, and Basil's interest with caring for the poor, and kind of brings them together when he's reading his Bible. He is this great interpreter of the Bible. The questions that he found meaningful in his life were, why am I drawn to the story of Christ? Why am I drawn to the Bible? And how does God show up in my own creative life? And how is that a small part of God being alive in me? Finally, we have Basil. Basil the Great. He is smart, he is arrogant, he knows how to get things done, he's a good politician, he's all of kind of he's the oldest son. He was sickly as a child, and they didn't think he was going to make it, but he did. But anyway, he kind of comes out of this, and the questions that are meaningful to him are, how can I use my influence to serve God? And how can I use my influence to serve others? And this is a really important question that comes out in all of Basil's sermons. What is God asking me to do for others? What is God asking me to do for others? I'm going to read you a little section of a sermon that he wrote. And the sermon is based on a passage, it's based on a gospel passage that talks about the rich tearing down their barns and building up new ones while the poor go hungry. And he would say he would often preach to very wealthy folks, and these are the types of sermons, just a taste of what he would say. He's responding to an imaginary person here. Tell me, what do you own yourself? What do you own yourself? What did you bring into this life? From where did you receive it? It is as if someone were to take the first seat in the theater and then bar everyone else from attending. This is what the rich do, so that one person alone enjoys that which is offered to the benefit of all in common. They seize the common goods before others have the opportunity and then claim them by their own right of preemption. So if that kind of, that's a little strong. It is a little strong because at this time, as Christianity is growing, the poor, it is not like we are able in some ways to live away from the poor. The way our cities are built, the way that we have cars and we can live, you might not have to interact with someone who is truly destitute in a way that in the ancient world, if you went everywhere by walking, you are going to see someone poor. You are going to see someone destitute, and you are going to come face to face. You're going to smell them. You're going to remember that smell as you are on your way home. And so when Basil has all of these social sometimes people might refer to it as social justice initiatives these days, but it's kind of in some ways preempting that. This is him reading, and these people reading the gospel and feeling a very strong need to implement what they're reading in the words of Jesus Christ. So, what did these folks do for the church? What did four, what did they do for the church? Radical living. But first, before I get to radical living, I want to read from the Gospel of Matthew, just a short bit. I'm going to read from Matthew 25. And all three of these saints read this text and took it seriously in different ways. And I want to just read a section. It's Matthew 25, and I'm starting in verse 34, which is a parable that Jesus talks about. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come to me, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, you gave me clothing. I was sick, you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry, gave you food, or thirsty, and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me." It is heavy on these folks' minds to take care of those in their midst, to take care of the poor around them, to take care of not just the poor materially, but the poor in spirit. They start these monastic communities, and when we think of monks and when we think of nuns today, I think we can think of it as a solitary life in a lot of ways, a very quiet and a very solitary life. They were very much in favor of starting these monastic communities that was truly a community, working together, living together for the benefit of this entire kind of region that they lived in, not just one particular town or one particular family. And it was a big shift in how monastic communities were set up for really until today. They are considered kind of the founding people around the Christian East in their monasteries. They preached what Jesus taught. They taught about who Jesus was. And they saw a church that had been hurt, that had been trampled, that had been left out to die, even within their own family. They had martyrs in their own family, just a generation back. And then they saw the church get a lot of power through the Roman Empire. And having to navigate, okay, we're moving from this place where we were powerless to now where we hold a lot of the power is a pretty big theological conundrum and question. It changes a lot of what we do and how we think about God and why Jesus has given to us things that he's given to us. How to follow Jesus and to be true on what he asks of his followers is at the heart of what the Cappadocians care about. And so, as a big part of this, I want to talk about something that Basil set up. It's called the Basiliad. This is, by many accounts, in 369, he had kind of started building this already. So he's in his 40s, and there's on the outskirts of the town where he lives some land that was gifted to him by an emperor. And because he went to school with a couple emperors in Athens, like you do. Yeah, not me, but maybe someone else in here. And so Basil gets this land, and he sets up, it's really well documented, he sets up what is essentially the first, a lot of people point back to kind of the first hospital, like the foundations on which many other hospitals were built. Perhaps this was happening in other sections of the Mediterranean at this time, but this one's really well documented. And I want to read, actually, so Gregory of Nazianzus writes, preaches this funeral, and he talks about the Basiliad, which was just outside of town, and he says this at Basil's funeral: "Go forth just a little way from the city, and behold the new city, a storehouse of piety, the common treasury of the wealthy, where disease is regarded in a religious light, and disaster is thought a blessing, and sympathy is put to the test." A continued refrain from Basil's sermons is this care for the poor and putting the teachings of Jesus into practice. And this year, the year that we are in the lectionary, we are going to hear a lot from the Gospel of Luke. And in the Gospel of Luke, there are story after story, parable after parable, where Jesus talks specifically to the wealthy. And so he preaches so much from the Gospel of Luke. And he says, I want to read another section of a sermon that he preached. "Why are you wealthy while that other man is poor? Are you not a cheater, taking those things that you have received for the sake of stewardship and making them your own?" He goes on to say, "The bread, if you have 2 loaves of bread, you have 1 loaf of bread. If you have 2 cloaks, you have 1 cloak. If you have 2 pairs of shoes, you have 1 pair of shoe." He encouraged the wealthy to support his social projects for the poor. And his work at the Basiliad was thought of and is now seen as historians as this major societal and social revolutionary thing that challenged a lot of the hypocrisy, the corruption, the greed that comes along when powers are shifting and when people can hoard up a lot of things. This place took care of the sick for free, meaning we go to the hospital now, and yes, there's insurance things that I'm not going to talk about, but you go to the hospital and you get cared for first. And this was not necessarily a common thing at the time. They would say, "Well, why don't you need to pay me before I'll help you." And so they would support the sick for free. They took care of the poor by feeding them. There was a colony of lepers that lived in this community outside of town. And they employed men and women to teach the sick and the poor trades, so that when they got better, they could go out and continue to make some money for themselves. I don't know about you, but when I think about crazy saints, this seems like a pretty normal thing for us in today's day and age. We think about nonprofits that do this kind of work and hospitals and that kind of thing. But at the time, and even maybe for some folks today, this is a radical idea in a lot of ways. Radical in that it is taking what Jesus preached to his disciples and trying to put it into context for his people. This is an image of a leper colony from a couple centuries later, but plagues would run through frequently, and a couple emperors after these folks were alive, Justinian in the 6th century, a plague ran through the Roman Empire and completely ravaged it, taking the population. We just don't exist in a world where we are having to bury as much as 40% of our population at a given time. And so these are kind of the things they're seeing, they're smelling, they're feeling, and what drew them to kind of do these more radical things. What can they teach us about the faith, other than how to wear a good beard? Yeah, how to wear a good beard. Look at those guys. What can they teach us about our faith and what makes them wild? I think their use of their own wealth and power in some ways says a lot about who they are. I think, and not necessarily, I think it draws us to reflect on it, especially in Lent, to think about these things that have control over us in ways that we definitely admit, like, yeah, my paycheck has a lot of control over what I do. But to really sit down in prayer and pray about it and to think on it for a long period of time. These people are all unwilling pastors and unwilling priests. All of the folks that get ordained get forced into it. They basically, at this time, they would close the doors when a bishop was like, I kind of like Jeff, I want to make him a priest. Close the doors, we're going to ordain you right now. And that's how it would happen. And so all of these folks go into ministry unwillingly in some ways. I'm so thankful we don't do it that way now. We just find the psychotic people that decide to do it themselves. But they are unwilling pastors and priests, and they end up becoming some of the best ones. These people that at first don't want to do this thing end up trusting God, and trusting God in ways that I can hope to trust God, and you can hope to trust God. They lived at a time of great upheaval in the church and its society. Does this sound familiar? Are things up in the air? Maybe a little bit. Maybe you feel that way. I take comfort in knowing that there are Christians that have gone on before me, that have lived through lots of things that I have lived through as well and will live through in the future. And whether it is personal tragedy or national tragedy, whatever you can think of it, it is a comforting thing to know that there are saints that have gone on before us and that we're still faithful people in the aftermath. They teach us how to collaborate with others. They teach us how to listen to others and follow God and love Jesus. So, right now, I've gone on for a little bit. What I want to do is, I have these 4 group questions. And we're going to break out, and you can sit with your tables. Now's the chance to kind of go to the bathroom and go to another table if you don't like the people you're sitting with. Yeah, that's a good move. But these group questions, they're a little hard to read. Hopefully there's someone at your table that can hit them, and I'll be walking around and I can help out as well. Go through these questions with your group. I want to kind of hear from you at the end if something has touched your heart in a certain way or that kind of thing. So I'm going to let you all talk for a good 10, 12 minutes, and then we'll come back together and we'll talk and we'll pray, and that will be that. Test. Hello. All right, folks. We are going to bring it back in because I definitely don't want to be the presenter that goes over. You can say a lot about me, but I won't keep you here past a certain amount of time. That's right. Thank you, Adi. You came here of your own volition, by the way. I'm just reminding you. No one forced you. This is Adi's Lenten practice, to come to the Lenten Soup Suppers. Was there anything said that would be great for other people to kind of hear about? Whether you heard it from someone else or whether you said it yourself, pride. We do want to hear about it, yeah. There's some hands.
What do the Cappadocians have to do with Lent?
What do they have to do with Lent? That's good. That's a good question. So Andrew chose this theme. No. I would say for me personally, the Cappadocians kind of teach me and have taught me how to reflect on the things that I generally don't think about a lot and that Lent draws me to think about, like the money I have, where I spend my time, how I give to the poor. Do I pray? Do I fast? What does that look like? And they invite me to do it in a way that is not this bag of rocks to kind of carry around, but in a way that I kind of get to, they wrote these letters to each other when they're talking about the work that they get to do and the love that they have for one another, that is just really life-giving in my mind. And so that's what draws me to kind of think about them as appropriate Lenten saints to think about. Yeah. Don, down here. Scurry. You know, they always say that.
So we were discussing question 2.
Yes.
And from our perspective, back then, it says it, they lived amongst the poor.
Yeah.
Today, it seems as if we marginalize the poor. It's not in my backyard kind of a deal. It's, I'll help them, I'll give them money as long as they're over there and not here by me.
At the stoplight, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the comment. Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah. Did anyone else kind of talk about that? Just as a raise of hands, I'm kind of curious. Okay, cool. Thanks. Bill?
Also with number 2, one of the things I mentioned is I'm so impressed with this church and the support of what we call here the local mission partners, Carroll Portal, Caritas Cedar Ridge, the Cove, and Mission Waco. And I'm not embarrassed to tell you that my youngest daughter with the 4 grandkids and her husband who can't work have to use Caritas and other food suppliers.
Yeah.
And it's very important, and I'm very impressed with this church on its support.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill. There's a lot of good work that happens with the folks that attend St. Albans, and all of you are active in the community too. Yeah. There's one more over here, I think. Maybe not. I think we can. Yeah. All right. We do have one right up here. Thank you. Last one here, and then we will close up.
That is a hot mic. Whoa. All right. Yeah. Trombone. Dan told this really beautiful story in our group. We were really focused on question 1. You want it closer? Okay.
Yeah.
I can do it. Dan was telling us the story about a mentor in his life who really taught him the meaning of grace in a way that he hadn't been able to experience before, just in terms of care and mentorship and really delighting over him as a person and helping to grow his faith. You can take the mic later and correct me. But and then finding out later in college that this person had a pretty, later found out that they'd had some kind of major moral failing that made it so that he was expelled from his ministry within the church, but had happened so long before, I'm really butchering the story, that had happened so long before, and there had been a lot of grace and goodness that it had actually formed him with the kind of knowledge through that into being this person who was so capable of grace and kindness, and that the experience of pain and knowledge and need for Christ and Christ's love had formed him in this beautiful way. And I found this so moving and powerful in terms of what we were talking about before with how Lent allows us to take down some of the finery of our lives, to be present with who we are and who God is and get to just experience that, to be present, I think, to the point earlier of moments when we need help. Maybe it's help from other people in our lives or services around us, but there are seasons in our lives that are complicated and hard, and that they can form us into more of the likeness of Christ, and they can give us courage to be alive to our own life. So, yeah.
Thanks, Ivy. Well, thank you for your responses. I appreciate that. I really do. I like hearing from y'all, especially in this setting. This is a prayer for, you're gonna hear it on Sunday, actually. This is the prayer for the third Sunday in Lent. And I would like to go ahead, we're gonna pray it together, and we'll get it right this time. And with thy spirit, since we're doing that, let's go ahead and pray, and then I'm going to step off for comments and questions because we're hitting 8 o'clock. But the Lord be with you. Almighty God, you know that we have no power in ourselves to help ourselves. Keep us both outwardly in our bodies and inwardly in our souls, that we may be defended from all adversities which may happen to the body and from all evil thoughts which may assault and hurt the soul. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for your comments. I will be hanging around if you have any more questions or comments, but go in peace. Adios, y'all.